All right, so those are the basics of support and resistance, kind of the fundamentals of what we're drawing, why we're drawing it, and the whole point of it. Now, just to recap on why we do that, we're basically trying to decide or have a good idea where we actually may. Let's remove some of these. Actually, we can remove all drawing objects. We don't really need these now. We're going to start some fresh ones, but we're basically trying to gauge where the actual market may turn. Now, if we've got a support level or a resistance level, and we saw that the market has turned and rotated and changed trend direction at that point previously, we cannot predict for sure that that is actually where the market is going to turn, because sometimes the market will break through, sometimes the market will hold, but it's giving us a bit more information. It's letting us realize, hey, you know what, for whatever reason, buyers aren't interested in taking this thing any higher than that, or sellers aren't interested in taking this thing any lower than that. So I want to pay attention to that, because we can either have two scenarios. We can have a scenario where we've got our resistance, a support level here, the market comes down to it. We can either look to buy and go long our position here, assuming that it's going to bounce off, or we can say, if we start to get a little bit of a push through with some volume, we'll talk about volume in a second, then we may well look to go short, thinking that's actually a genuine breakout, that support is no longer holding, and that's how we're going to try and profit from the trade. This obviously decision comes down to you as a trader. We've got some setups and strategies we can use, and some clues that we can try and gather to see if that support is going to hold or not, and we'll go into some depth about that. But ultimately, that's the kind of decision we're trying to make. And if you see, for example, on this FTSE daily chart here, we had a low back in February here, so someone may well say, well, that's good support. And actually, as the market came down to it on the 19th of April, it held and it became support, and we pushed back off. Yes, it does appear like there's the news there which helped the situation, but ultimately, this is why we're always looking out for resistance and support. Now, one thing to add, guys, is that support and resistance becomes support, and support becomes resistance, and vice versa. So very often, once you've broken through a key level, that level then turns into resistance. So let's look at an example I can see right away on this FTSE chart. We've got a pretty decent resistance level here. Okay, you can see we've got a cluster of times where this market couldn't get above this approximately 7,100 level, rolled back over quite a big way, then came up to the end of the year and broke through coming into the new year, pushed right up to like a January high, and then pulled back. Pretty standard market stuff, pushed up, pulled back, revisits, that kind of thing. But look how far the pullback went. The pullback went back to the previous resistance that has now become support. So that's always worth keeping an eye on. If support breaks, if resistance breaks, look for it to flip its kind of polarity, if you like. If you look at it like a magnet, it now becomes the opposite of what it was before. It's just a way that it repels the market. And we've got lots of examples like this. In fact, let's go and see if we can find some more. We've got one right here on a shorter time frame. I'm going to use the free drawing pen here, so you're going to have to forgive me, this is not accurate. We've got a resistance level here. We've got a couple of levels, tagged it several times on our daily chart. Eventually, we broke through at this point here. But look, as we came back down and tagged it again, that resistance became support and caused the market to push up above it. Okay, subsequently, we broke back through it. But then again, that support flipped. It went from resistance to support, and now it's resistance again, and held the market here. And you can see even here we had a little bit of a struggle to get through it. It wasn't a big struggle, but it was a struggle nevertheless. So they are support and resistance is ultimately a level that people are watching. It's key. It's important that we're watching it ourselves. Again, we can look at it on a multiple time frames. If we went to a 60-minute, let's flick the pen on, or a 1 minute, we can draw on exactly what we need to do. In fact, you know what, let's change a bit and go onto the Dow. We're a bit bored of the FTSE now. Let's have a look at the Dow. We're on a 60-minute on the Dow, which is an hourly. Let's see if we can eyeball some support and resistance areas. So right away, we can see key levels of resistance and support. They stand out like a sore thumb. You've got highs here, it's obviously a resistance level. You've got some support level down here. 1, 2, 3 tags. Broke through, finally pushed back up. It's ultimately an eyeballing game. And again, we're not talking about being very, very accurate here. I would quite happily put my resistance level there and say, you know what, if I was forgetting that was in play, We've struggled there. We've struggled here, 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 here. We're not exactly to the tick, but we're not far off. And for the time frame that I'm looking at, that is more than adequate. If we went down to a 1 minute, let's go down to a 1 minute chart and have a look on a 1 minute perspective and see how support flips into resistance. Now today we're a little bit quiet and we're pre-market. Let's go back and see if we can find a little bit more of an active day for the example. Let's scroll back. Now, one thing to say as I'm scrolling through here looking for something as a good example, I'm really probably trying to cherry pick a bit too much here. But one thing to say is that it's better when we've got volume coming in. You know, support and resistance is kind of a little bit of a funny art if you haven't got the volume, because if you haven't got the volume, there's no participants to dictate whether that was support or resistance. If it came to it, the market came to it and held, and there was volume there, it indicates that other participants are getting involved. And here's a very, very small one on a 1 minute. You know, we can see we had a support here. The market kind of held, pushed up late in the afternoon, and then we got hammered through it with some sort of news that looks like I see some volume there, a decent range, pushed back. It became resistance very briefly for about 15-20 minutes. The market couldn't get above it, then it finally got above it, held above it, and then we used that as kind of a springboard. So that's just really rough example that we just eyeballed after just scrolling through. But ultimately, support turns into resistance, resistance turns into support. The way you draw it is just by eyeballing the pivot points on the chart. No real right or wrong, but bearing in mind, I really think that you should, personally, this is the way I do it, and I think that most traders will look at it like this, is that it's kind of a zone. It's not really a pinpoint area. You've got to give it a bit of leeway. And even in 1 minute, you see we go through it by, you know, kind of a couple of ticks, but in reality, it does still hold.